Is that really them? I can't believe they actually showed up looking like that.
They had it all. Designer everything. Campus royalty. Their motto was simple: no lace, no space. But crowns built on lies always fall. This is the story of how three queens poisoned themselves with pride. Kindly subscribe for more interesting story. Thanks.
Riverside University's School of Nursing sat on the edge of the city like a fortress of ambition. Red brick buildings stretched 3 stories high, with massive glass windows that caught the morning sun.
Inside those walls, futures were made or destroyed. This was one of the most competitive nursing programs in the state. Only the smartest, the most dedicated, the most driven made it through. Most students looked like they were surviving a war. Hair pulled into messy buns, scrubs wrinkled from double shifts, eyes bloodshot from studying pharmacology until 3 a.m. They carried overstuffed backpacks that weighed down their shoulders, clutched coffee cups like lifelines, and walked with the exhausted shuffle of people who hadn't slept in days. But 3 girls walked differently. Madison, Brittany, and Ashley entered the Monday morning lecture hall like queens entering their throne room. Heads turned, whispers started, cameras came out. They didn't just walk, they performed. Madison's honey blonde lace front swayed past her shoulders, installed so perfectly it looked like it grew from her scalp. Each strand caught the light. Each step made it bounce. She'd paid $450 for that wig, and she made sure everyone knew it was worth every penny. Brittany's jet black bun cascaded down her back in perfect curls, 22 inches of Brazilian hair that cost more than most students' textbooks. She flipped it over her shoulder with practiced precision, knowing every eye in the room was watching. Ashley's ombre waves shimmered under the fluorescent lights, honey blonde melting into caramel brown. Her hair alone was a $600 investment. Her nails? Stiletto acrylics, freshly done, clicking against her iPhone 14 Pro Max screen like a deadly rhythm. Their scrubs weren't the standard blue polyester everyone else wore. Madison wore custom-fitted figs in Caribbean blue. Brittany's were tailored to hug every curve. Ashley's had her name embroidered in gold thread across the chest. They paired them with designer sneakers, Golden Goose, Balenciaga, shoes that cost more than most students' monthly rent. They didn't carry backpacks stuffed with anatomy books like the other students. Madison carried a Louis Vuitton Neverfull tote. Brittany swung a Gucci Marmont crossbody. Ashley's Chanel classic flap bag hung from her shoulder like a trophy. Every logo visible, every brand screaming money. Girl, did you see what she's wearing? Brittany's voice cut through the lecture hall, loud enough for everyone to hear. Her eyes locked on a girl in the 3rd row. Emma, quiet, hard-working Emma, sat with her natural hair pulled into a simple ponytail. Her scrubs were standard issue. She was everything Madison, Brittany, and Ashley pretended not to be. Madison snickered, her perfectly glossed lips curling into a smile that had no warmth. No lace, no space. The words hung in the air like a threat. It was their motto, their law, their way of dividing the world into people who mattered and people who didn't. Ashley giggled, loud and cruel, literally, like, how do you even show up looking like that? She filmed herself for TikTok, making sure her lace front was perfectly positioned in the frame, making sure the world saw her and not the girl she was mocking. The 3 of them slid into their usual seats in the back row, phones out, AirPods in one ear, barely glancing at Professor Chen as he began the lecture on cardiac pharmacology. Madison scrolled through Instagram, 23,000 followers and climbing. Her latest post, a mirror selfie in designer scrubs, had 2,400 likes in an hour. Around them, students scribbled notes frantically. Nursing school was brutal. One missed lecture could mean failing an exam. One failed exam could mean getting kicked out of the program. Tuition wasted. Dreams destroyed. But Madison, Brittany, and Ashley didn't care about notes. They cared about being noticed. And they were. Everyone at Riverside knew their names. Everyone talked about them. Some girls tried to copy them, showing up with cheap lace fronts and knockoff bags, hoping to earn their approval. Others avoided them entirely, keeping their heads down, praying they wouldn't become the next target. Because Madison, Brittany, and Ashley didn't just flaunt their wealth, they weaponized it. If a girl showed up to clinical rotation with a synthetic wig, they'd whisper just loud enough for her to hear. "Is that plastic?" "Girl, I can literally smell it from here." If someone wore knockoff designer shoes, they'd take a photo and post it on their private Instagram story with crying laughing emojis and the caption, "Not the DH Gate specials." Their followers, mostly other Riverside students, would flood the comments with more mockery. If a student couldn't afford the latest iPhone and still carried an Android, they'd make a scene. "Ew, green text bubbles? Couldn't be me. How do you even survive?" It didn't matter if that student was smart, kind, or dedicated. If you didn't look the part, you didn't exist in their world. Emma learned that the hard way. She was everything Madison, Brittany, and Ashley pretended to be, but weren't. Top of her class, first to volunteer for extra shifts, always prepared, always kind. She came from a small town 3 hours away, worked 2 jobs to afford tuition, and sent half her paychecks home to her single mother, who was battling cancer. Emma didn't have money for $400 lace fronts or $2,000 designer bags. She wore her natural hair, thick, dark, beautiful, pulled into simple styles. Her scrubs were standard issue. Her phone was 2 generations old, but she showed up every day with something Madison, Brittany, and Ashley had lost a long time ago: dignity. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling 12-hour clinical shift, Emma made a mistake. She tried to be kind. She'd made homemade coffee scrubs, a recipe her grandmother taught her, and was giving them to classmates as small gifts, acts of kindness in a program that felt brutal and lonely. She approached Madison, Brittany, and Ashley's table in the hospital cafeteria. They were sitting like royalty. Phones out, designer bags on the table, leftovers from expensive takeouts scattered between them. Emma held out a small gift bag, her hands shaking slightly. "Hey," she said softly, "I just wanted to say I think you guys always look amazing. I made these for some of the girls in our cohort. Thought you might like one." The table went silent. Madison looked up from her phone slowly, deliberately. Her eyes scanned Emma from head to toe. Natural hair, plain scrubs, worn sneakers. Her expression shifted from boredom to something crueler: amusement. Brittany smirked, exchanging a glance with Ashley. Ashley's hand moved to her phone, already recording. This was content. This was entertainment. "Aw, that's so sweet," Madison said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. She didn't reach for the bag. "But, babe, we don't really do homemade." She said the word like it was a disease. Brittany leaned back in her chair, flipping her 22 inches of Brazilian bundles over her shoulder. "Yeah, no offense, but we get our skincare from Sephora. Not like someone's kitchen." Her laugh was sharp, cutting. Ashley snapped a photo of Emma standing there, awkward, frozen, holding her small gift like an offering to gods who didn't want it. "This is giving charity case vibes," she said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "No lace, no space, remember?" The cafeteria fell silent. 50 students watched. Some looked away, embarrassed for Emma but too afraid to speak up. Others pulled out their phones, filming, waiting to see what would happen next. This was Riverside entertainment, watching someone get destroyed. Emma's face burned, her hands trembled, the small gift bag suddenly felt heavy, like evidence of her foolishness. I just thought." "You thought wrong," Madison said coldly, her eyes already back on her phone, dismissing Emma like she was nothing. "You can go now." Emma walked away. Each step felt like dragging weights. Behind her, Madison, Brittany, and Ashley erupted into laughter, loud, performative, making sure everyone heard, making sure everyone knew, this is what happens when you're not one of us. That night, Emma sat alone in her dorm room and cried. Not angry tears, not vengeful tears, just tired, sad tears of someone who tried to be kind and been punished for it. She didn't curse them, she didn't plot revenge, she simply whispered into the darkness, "If this is what beauty looks like, I don't want it." She didn't know it yet, but somewhere in the universe, that prayer was heard, and wheels were already turning, because Madison, Brittany, and Ashley had a secret that funded every designer bag, every lace front installation, every bottle of champagne they posted on Instagram. a secret that would destroy them. They weren't rich. Madison's mom worked in a school cafeteria serving lunch to middle schoolers for $14 an hour. Brittany's dad drove a delivery truck, working 60-hour weeks just to keep the lights on. Ashley's family lived paycheck to paycheck in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment where she shared a room with her 2 younger sisters. So where did the money come from? The $450 lace fronts installed every 3 weeks? The Louis Vuitton bags that cost $2,000 each? The designer scrubs, the fresh manicures every week, the bottle service at upscale clubs, the luxury lifestyle they flaunted so shamelessly on social media? It came from the nights, 3 times a week, after their evening classes ended around 8 p.m., Madison, Brittany, and Ashley would disappear. They'd change out of their scrubs in the campus bathroom, transforming. Off came the nursing student costumes, on went the tight dresses, the 6-inch heels, the heavy makeup that made them look older, more experienced, more expensive. They'd call an Uber and head downtown to Eclipse, an upscale nightclub with velvet ropes, expensive cover charges, and a clientele that could afford both. Businessmen in $1,000 suits, professional athletes with endorsement deals, doctors, lawyers, men with money to burn and loneliness to fill. The girls didn't work behind the bar. They didn't serve drinks. They danced. They flirted. They laughed at bad jokes and leaned in close when men opened their wallets. It wasn't technically illegal. They weren't selling anything explicit. But they knew the game. Sit on the right lap, smile at the right moment, and a man might slip $500 into your purse. Dance close enough. Whisper sweet enough, and he'd hand over his credit card without question. Get yourself something nice, they'd say, and Madison, Brittany, and Ashley always did. By sunrise, they'd return to campus with fresh cash, new bags, another piece of jewelry they'd post on Instagram with captions like, "Blessed, BS," or "Hard work pays off." By 8 a.m., they'd be back in scrubs, sitting in lecture halls, mocking girls like Emma who actually worked hard. No one knew. Not their classmates who envied them, not their professors who tolerated them, not even their families who wondered how their daughters afforded such expensive things on a student budget. But secrets have a way of surfacing, especially in the age of smartphones and social media, especially when someone is watching. And at Riverside University, someone was watching. Jordan Hayes wasn't like most nursing students at Riverside University. She was older, 28, a veteran who'd served 4 years in the Army as a combat medic, before deciding to pursue nursing school. She'd seen things most 22-year-olds couldn't imagine. Soldiers bleeding out in the desert, field hospitals under fire, death that came quick and ugly, no matter how hard you fought to stop it. Jordan didn't care about lace fronts or designer bags. She wore her hair in a simple bun, her scrubs plain, her backpack military issue. She showed up early, stayed late, asked the hard questions in class. Professors loved her, classmates respected her, or stayed out of her way. She'd enrolled at Riverside mid-semester, transferring in from a community college after finally saving enough from her VA benefits. She was quiet, observant, and had zero tolerance for nonsense, which is why when she walked into her first clinical orientation and saw Madison, Brittany, and Ashley giggling in the corner, checking their phones instead of paying attention to the charge nurse's instructions, something in her jaw tightened. But she said nothing. Jordan had learned a long time ago that some battles weren't worth fighting on day one. She watched, she waited, she filed information away like ammunition. And then, 2 weeks into the semester, she saw them. It was a Friday night. Jordan had picked up a weekend shift as a nursing assistant at Mercy General Hospital downtown. Extra money, extra experience. She clocked out around 11 p.m. exhausted, and decided to grab food from a late-night taco truck she'd heard about near the club district. She was standing in line, still in her scrubs, when she heard the laughter. Familiar laughter. She turned and saw them standing outside Eclipse, the upscale nightclub with the velvet ropes and the bouncers in black suits. Madison, Brittany, and Ashley, but not the way she'd seen them in class. They were dressed like they'd stepped out of a music video. Skin-tight dresses, heels so high they could barely walk straight, makeup so heavy it looked like a mask, hair flowing, lips glossy, bodies swaying as they laughed and leaned into a group of older men in expensive suits. One of the men, Silver-haired, 50s, Rolex glinting under the streetlights had his arm around Madison's waist. She giggled, tilting her head back, her hand resting on his chest. Brittany was whispering something into another man's ear, her fingers playing with the collar of his shirt. Ashley took a champagne flute from a third man, clinking glasses, posing for a photo he snapped on his phone. Jordan's stomach turned. She knew exactly what this was. She'd seen it before, back when she was stationed overseas, in the towns near the bases, where young women would show up at the clubs, playing the game, trading attention for cash. It wasn't always prostitution. Sometimes it was just proximity, being pretty enough, available enough, and letting men with money feel like they bought something. Jordan pulled out her phone. She didn't think twice. She started recording. The video was shaky at first. She was standing across the street, partially hidden behind a food truck, but her phone's camera was good enough. She caught Madison climbing into the back seat of a black Mercedes with the older man. Caught Brittany laughing as another man tucked bills into her purse. Caught Ashley posing for photos, pouting, blowing kisses. She recorded for 3 minutes. Then she walked away. Jordan didn't post the video that night. She went home, watched it again, thought about what to do with it. She wasn't the type to gossip, wasn't the type to ruin people for fun. But then she thought about Emma. She'd seen what happened in the cafeteria, had watched Madison, Brittany, and Ashley humiliate that sweet, hard-working girl for no reason other than cruelty. Had seen Emma's face crumble, seen her walk away trying not to cry. And she thought about all the other students they'd mocked. The girls who couldn't afford lace fronts, who worked 2 jobs just to pay tuition, who showed up exhausted and discouraged because people like Madison made them feel worthless. Jordan opened her laptop. She created a burner email account, and she sent the video to the Riverside University Nursing Students Facebook group, anonymous, untraceable. The subject line read, "Thought you should know who you're really dealing with." By Monday morning, the video had been viewed over 15,000 times. It spread like wildfire. Students watched it between classes, shared it in group chats, whispered about it in the hallways. By the time Madison, Brittany, and Ashley walked into their 9 a.m. pharmacology lecture, the entire room went silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward them. Madison felt it first, the weight of the stares, the lack of the usual admiring glances. Something was wrong. She pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. Her DMs were flooded. "Is this you? OMG, I knew you were fake. You're disgusting." Her hands started shaking. Brittany's phone buzzed in her lap. A text from her younger sister. "Why are people sending me a video of you getting into some old man's car?" Ashley's notifications were exploding. Comments on her latest post had turned vicious. "How much did he pay you? All that designer and you're really just a club rat. No lace, no space, more like no dignity, no grace." Madison stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "We're leaving." The 3 of them walked out of the lecture hall, heads down, ignoring the whispers that followed them like ghosts. By lunchtime, the university administration had seen the video. By Tuesday, Madison, Brittany, and Ashley were called into the Dean of Nursing's office. Dean Patricia Caldwell was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, a former ICU nurse who'd seen it all and tolerated nothing. She sat behind her desk, hands folded, her expression unreadable. The 3 girls sat across from her, silent for the first time in their lives. "I'm going to be very clear," Dean Caldwell said. "What you do off campus, on your own time, is your business. But when it reflects on this program, when it damages the reputation of this university and the integrity of the nursing profession, it becomes my business." "We didn't do anything illegal," Madison said, her voice small. "I didn't say you did," the dean replied coolly. "But you violated the code of conduct you signed when you were accepted into this program. Professionalism, integrity, respect. You've shown none of that." Brittany's eyes filled with tears. "Are you kicking us out?" Dean Caldwell leaned back in her chair. "I'm placing you on academic probation. One more incident, one more complaint, one more stunt like this, and you're done. Do you understand?" They nodded, humiliated, silent. "Good, you're dismissed." But the damage was already done. By the time they left the dean's office, the whispers had turned into open mockery. Students who once feared them now laughed openly. Yo, aren't those the girls from the video? Yeah, they really thought they were something. Guess the lace didn't save them after all. Their Instagram comments were brutal. Their follower counts dropped. DMs from men they danced with at Eclipse went silent. No one wanted to be associated with the scandal. Even worse, their families found out. Madison's mother called, screaming through the phone. Are you out of your mind? Dancing for old men? What were you thinking? Brittany's father showed up at her dorm, his face red with shame and rage. He didn't yell. He just looked at her with disgust and said, I didn't raise you for this. Ashley's younger brother sent her a text. Everyone at my high school saw the video. Thanks for making me a joke. The weight of it crushed them. For the first time in their lives, Madison, Brittany, and Ashley felt small. And they had no idea it was only going to get worse. That night, the three of them sat in Madison's dorm room, surrounded by the designer bags and wigs and shoes that suddenly felt like evidence of their shame. We can't stay here, Brittany said, her voice hollow. Where are we supposed to go? Ashley whispered. Madison stared at her phone, scrolling through hateful comments, her perfectly installed lace front hanging limp around her face. The city, she said finally. We go to the city. Start over. No one knows us there. And do what? Brittany asked. Madison's jaw tightened. Whatever we have to. 2 days later, they packed their bags, dropped out of Riverside's nursing program, and disappeared. No apologies. Just 3 girls running from the truth, convinced they could outrun their shame. But shame has a way of following you, and in the city, it would find them again, this time with consequences far darker than a viral video. The city swallowed them whole. Madison, Brittany, and Ashley arrived with 2 suitcases each, a few $1,000s between them, and a plan that was more desperation than strategy. Disappear into the noise, the lights, the endless anonymity of a place where no one cared who you used to be. They found a cramped studio apartment in a neighborhood that smelled like old garbage and fried food. The walls were thin enough to hear their neighbors arguing at 2 a.m. The ceiling had a water stain that spread like a bruise. The bathroom mirror was cracked down the middle. It was nothing like the influencer lifestyle they'd projected online. But they told themselves it was temporary. We just need to get back on our feet, Madison said, unpacking her designer bags and setting them on the stained carpet like they could somehow elevate the space. A few months, maybe less. We'll save up, rebrand, start fresh. Brittany nodded, but her eyes were hollow. She hadn't spoken to her father since he'd looked at her with that crushing disappointment. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Ashley sat on the edge of the mattress they'd have to share, scrolling through Instagram. Her follower count had dropped to 14,000. The comments were still brutal. Fallen off. Where'd all that designer go? Guess the old men stopped paying. She locked her phone and threw it across the room. We need money, Ashley said flatly. Like now. Madison looked around the tiny apartment, at the peeling paint, the flickering light bulb, the absence of everything they'd worked so hard to build. Then we go back to what works, she said. Within a week, they were back at the clubs. Not Eclipse, that was too close to Riverside, too risky. But the city had plenty of others, venues with names like Velvet, Onyx, Skyline, places where the music was loud enough to drown out shame and the lights were dim enough to hide regret. They slipped back into their roles easily. Madison, the bubbly one who made men feel young again. Brittany, the mysterious one who listened and nodded and made them feel understood. Ashley, the playful one who laughed at their jokes and made them feel desired. The money came in slower than before. The city was more competitive. There were younger girls, prettier girls, girls who hadn't been exposed in viral videos. The men had options, and Madison, Brittany, and Ashley were just 3 more faces in a sea of ambition and desperation. But they made enough. Enough to pay rent, enough to buy food, enough to keep their lace fronts installed and their nails done, because without those things, they didn't know who they were anymore. Some nights, they'd come home at 4 a.m. with $300 each. Once, they came home with nothing but bruised egos and sore feet. It wasn't glamorous anymore. It was survival. And survival, they were learning, had a cost. His name was Dr. Marcus Brennan. He was 43, handsome in that polished, expensive way. Tailored suits, Swiss watch, salt and pepper hair styled perfectly. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, traveling between hospitals and private practices, selling medications that doctors prescribed and patients paid for without question. He had money, lots of it. And he had a taste for beautiful women who didn't ask too many questions. Madison met him first. It was a Saturday night at Onyx, and she'd been sitting at the bar nursing a drink she couldn't afford when he slid onto the stool next to her. "You look like you're thinking too hard," he said, his voice smooth, confident. Madison glanced at him, sized him up in seconds. Expensive cologne, Rolex, wedding ring conspicuously absent, even though the tan line said it had been there recently. She smiled. "Maybe I am. What's a girl like you doing here alone? Waiting for someone interesting to show up?" He laughed. "Well, here I am." They talked for an hour. He bought her drinks. Top shelf, nothing cheap. He asked about her life, and she lied easily. Said she was a model between gigs. Said she'd just moved to the city for opportunities. Said she loved the nightlife, the energy, the freedom. He ate it up. By the end of the night, he'd slipped her $500 in his business card. "Call me," he said. "I'm in town a lot. I like spending time with smart, beautiful women." Madison pocketed the cash in the card, her heart pounding. This was different. This wasn't some drunk businessman looking for attention. This was someone with real money, real connections, someone who could change everything. She brought Brittany and Ashley to meet him the following week. Dr. Brennan didn't mind. In fact, he seemed delighted. 3 beautiful women, he said, grinning as they slid into the VIP booth he'd reserved. "I must be the luckiest man in the city." He ordered bottles of champagne that cost more than their rent. He told them stories about his travels, Paris, Dubai, Tokyo. He made them laugh. He made them feel seen. And then, around 1 a.m., when the music was loud and the crowd was thick, he leaned in close to Madison. "You girls ever try anything to keep the party going?" he asked, his voice low. Madison frowned. "What do you mean?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. Inside was white powder, cocaine. Madison's stomach dropped. She'd never done drugs. None of them had. They drank, sure. But this was different. This was a line they'd never crossed. "It's nothing crazy," Dr. Brennan said casually, tapping the vial. "Just a little boost. Keeps you sharp, keeps you energized. Everyone in my world does it. Doctors, lawyers, executives. It's not what you think." Brittany and Ashley exchanged glances. "I don't know," Brittany said slowly. Dr. Brennan shrugged, leaning back. "No pressure. But trust me, once you try it, you'll see why people love it. Makes everything better. The music, the conversation, the night. You feel alive." He poured a small line onto the table, pulled out a credit card, and shaped it with practiced ease. Then he leaned down and snorted it in one smooth motion. He sat back up, grinning, his eyes suddenly brighter. "See? Nothing scary, just fun." Madison looked at Brittany. Brittany looked at Ashley. They were tired. Tired of struggling. Tired of the shame that clung to them like smoke. And this man, this wealthy, confident man, was offering them a way to feel good again, to feel powerful, to feel like they mattered. "One time," Madison said finally, "just to try it." Dr. Brennan smiled. "That's my girl." The first line burned. Madison's nose stung, her eyes watered, and for a moment she thought she'd made a terrible mistake. But then the rush hit. It started in her chest, a warmth, a tingling, a sudden surge of energy that spread through her entire body like electricity. Her heart raced, her mind sharpened, the music sounded better, the lights looked brighter. She felt confident, unstoppable, like she could do anything. She looked at Brittany and Ashley, both wide-eyed, both feeling it too. "Oh my God," Ashley whispered, laughing. "This is insane." Brittany leaned back, her head tilted toward the ceiling, a smile spreading across her face. "I feel amazing." Dr. Brennan laughed. "Told you." They stayed at the club until 5 a.m., dancing, talking, laughing harder than they had in months. For the first time since the video, since the shame, since the fall, they felt good. When they finally stumbled out into the early morning light, Dr. Brennan handed Madison another vial. For next time, he said, winking. Call me when you run out. Madison took it, her fingers closing around the glass. She told herself it was just for fun, just for the nights when they needed a boost, just for when things got hard. But deep down, in a place she didn't want to look, she knew the truth. They'd just crossed a line they could never uncross, and Dr. Marcus Brennan wasn't a savior. He was a trap. Over the next few weeks, cocaine became part of the routine. At first it was only on weekends, a line before heading to the club, a line at 2 a.m. to keep the energy up, a line when they got home to keep the high going just a little longer. Then it was twice a week. Then every other night. Then every night. Dr. Brennan always had more. He never asked for money. He just gave it to them, smiling, generous, like a friend doing them a favor. But favors, they would learn, always come with a price. Their bodies started to change. Madison lost weight first, not the healthy kind, the kind that made her cheekbones too sharp, her collarbones too pronounced. She stopped eating regular meals. Food didn't taste good anymore. Nothing felt as good as the high. Brittany's skin broke out in painful cysts. She tried to cover them with makeup, but the more she used, the worse it got. Her hair started thinning at the temples. Strands came out when she brushed it. Ashley's teeth started to ache. She ignored it at first, but soon the pain was constant, throbbing. She couldn't afford a dentist. She just took more cocaine to numb it. Their designer bags sat in the corner of the apartment, gathering dust. They sold 2 of them to pay rent. Then 3 more. Then the shoes, the jewelry. The money from Dr. Brennan, which had once seemed endless, now barely covered their habit, because cocaine wasn't cheap, and addiction didn't negotiate. The girls who once ruled Riverside University with lace fronts and designer bags now woke up every morning with one thought: where's the next line? And the answer was always the same: Dr. Brennan. 3 months into their new life, Madison, Brittany, and Ashley barely recognized themselves. The apartment that once held their designer bags and expensive wigs now looked like a crime scene of neglect. Empty takeout containers piled in the corner. Dirty clothes spread across the floor. The bathroom mirror they used to pose in front of for hours was now covered in grime, the crack down the middle seeming wider, like even the reflection couldn't bear to look at them anymore. Madison stood in front of that mirror one morning, staring at a stranger. Her honey blonde lace front, the one she'd paid $450 for just 4 months ago, hung limp and matted. She hadn't had it reinstalled in weeks. Couldn't afford it. The edges were lifting, showing her real hairline underneath, thin and damaged from years of tight braids and glue. Her skin, once glowing and filtered to perfection on Instagram, was now pale and sunken. Dark circles carved shadows under her eyes. Her lips were chapped and cracked. She'd lost 15 pounds, but not in the way people complimented. Her clothes hung off her frame like she was disappearing inside them. She pulled the wig off. Underneath, her real hair was breaking off in clumps. Bald spots dotted her scalp, some from the tension of the wigs, some from malnutrition, some from stress her body couldn't handle anymore. She touched one of the bald patches and felt her stomach turn. No lace, no space. The words echoed in her head like a cruel joke. She didn't have lace anymore, and she was running out of space in the world. Brittany's decline was just as brutal. Her jet black bundles, the hair she used to flip with such confidence, were gone. She'd sold them 2 weeks ago for $80 to a girl on Facebook Marketplace who didn't ask questions. The money went toward cocaine, and it was gone within 2 days. Now her natural hair, damaged and breaking, was pulled into a sad, thin ponytail that barely reached her shoulders. Her edges were gone. Her scalp was visible through the sparse strands. But it was her skin that horrified her the most. The cystic acne had spread from her jawline to her cheeks, angry red welts that throbbed and oozed. She tried every drugstore cream she could afford. Nothing worked. She couldn't afford a dermatologist, couldn't afford the prescriptions even if she saw one. She stopped looking at herself in reflections, stopped taking photos, deleted Instagram off her phone entirely after someone commented on an old post. "You used to be so pretty." She cried for an hour after reading that, because she didn't know the answer. Ashley's teeth were rotting. It started with sensitivity, sharp pain when she drank something cold. Then it was constant aching, a dull throb that never went away. She could see it when she opened her mouth. Her gums were receding, her teeth yellowing, small black spots forming along the edges. Cocaine and neglect were eating her alive from the inside out. She couldn't smile anymore without feeling ashamed. Couldn't laugh without covering her mouth. The girl who used to pose for every camera, lips glossed and perfect, now kept her mouth closed in every interaction. Her ombre waves, once her pride, were gone. She'd sold the wig for $60, used the money for one night's worth of powder. Now her real hair, brittle and dry, hung just past her ears. It smelled faintly sour, because she hadn't washed it in a week. Washing it took energy she didn't have. Energy that only came from cocaine now. The three of them barely spoke anymore. They used to talk for hours. About boys, about plans, about their next Instagram post, their next outfit, their next victory. Now they sat in silence, each trapped in their own private hell, waiting for the next hit. Dr. Brennan still came around, but he wasn't generous anymore. "You girls owe me," he said one night, standing in their apartment doorway, his suit as crisp as ever, his expression colder than they'd ever seen. "What?" Madison's voice was hoarse. "You think I've been giving you this stuff for free?" He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "You've gone through thousands of dollars worth of product. You think that's charity?" Brittany's hands trembled. "You said—" "I said a lot of things," Dr. Brennan interrupted. "And you believed them because you wanted to. You owe me $12,000. The number hit them like a freight train. $12,000. They didn't have 1,200. They didn't have 12. "We don't have that," Ashley whispered. Dr. Brennan shrugged. "Then you work it off. I know people, parties, private events. You do what you're told, you keep your mouths shut, and we're square." Madison felt bile rise in her throat. She knew what he was implying, knew exactly what kind of work he meant. "We're not," she started. "You're not what?" Dr. Brennan's voice turned sharp. "You're not desperate, you're not addicts, because from where I'm standing, you're both. So you can either figure out how to pay me back, or I can make your lives a lot more difficult. Your choice." 1. He left the vial on the table, one last hit, like bait. And then he walked out. The three of them stared at the vial for a long time. Finally, Madison reached for it. They started missing rent. The landlord, a gruff man in his 60s who smelled like cigarettes, knocked on their door with increasing aggression. "You're 2 months behind," he said. "I want my money, or you're out." "We'll have it soon," Madison lied. "You said that last time. Just give us one more week." He looked at them, really looked at them, and for a moment something like pity crossed his face. But pity didn't pay bills. "1 week," he said, "where I'm changing the locks." They didn't have the money in a week. They came home one evening to find their belongings in trash bags on the sidewalk and a new lock on the door. Homeless. The word felt unreal, like something that happened to other people. People who made bad choices. People who didn't plan ahead. But here they were. Madison, Brittany, and Ashley. Once the queens of Riverside University, once untouchable, once worshipped, now sitting on a city sidewalk with trash bags full of clothes they couldn't sell and wigs they couldn't wear. They slept in a 24-hour laundromat that first night, curled up on plastic chairs, using their jackets as blankets. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The machines hummed. A homeless man in the corner muttered to himself. This was rock bottom. But rock bottom, they would learn, had a basement. Dr. Brennan found them 3 days later. They were sitting outside a convenience store, begging for change, when his black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. He rolled down the window, looked at them with something close to amusement, and said, "You girls look rough." Madison wanted to spit at him, wanted to scream. But she was too tired. Too hungry, too desperate. "We need help," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I told you how to get help," Dr. Brennan said. "You work off what you owe me. That offer still stands." Brittany started crying. Ashley just stared at the ground. Madison felt the last piece of her pride crumble into dust. "What do we have to do?" she asked. Dr. Brennan smiled. Get in the car, I'll explain on the way. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Private parties in penthouse apartments. Men with too much money and too little conscience. Nights that started with forced smiles and ended with shame so deep, it felt like drowning. They did what they were told. They kept their mouths shut, and every night, Dr. Brennan spoke. Brennan gave them just enough cocaine to keep them compliant, keep them numb, keep them from thinking too hard about what they'd become. Madison stopped looking in mirrors entirely. Brittany stopped talking. Ashley stopped crying. They were ghosts now. Shells of the girls who once chanted no lace, no space, like it meant something. And one cold November morning, after a particularly brutal night, Madison woke up in an unfamiliar apartment, alone, with no memory of how she got there. She looked down at her arms, bruised, track marks forming where she'd let someone inject her, because snorting wasn't enough anymore. She looked at her reflection in a nearby window. Bald patches, sunken eyes, skin like paper. She didn't recognize herself. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she thought, I'm going to die here. The thought didn't scare her. It almost felt like relief. But somewhere far away, in a place she'd tried to forget, Emma was praying. And sometimes prayers find their way to the people who need them most, even when they don't deserve it. Emma couldn't explain why she thought about them. It had been 5 months since Madison, Brittany, and Ashley disappeared from Riverside University. 5 months since the video. 5 months since the scandal that rocked the nursing program and sent 3 girls running into the night. Most students had moved on. The story became campus legend, a cautionary tale whispered in study groups and orientation sessions. Don't let vanity destroy you. Focus on why you're here. But Emma couldn't forget. Not because she forgave them for what they did, not because she missed them, but because late at night, when she finished her clinical rotations and sat alone in her dorm room, she'd remember the look in Madison's eyes that day in the cafeteria. Underneath all the cruelty, underneath the makeup and the designer bags and the vicious words, there had been something else. Fear. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of being invisible. Fear of not mattering. Emma understood that fear. She just chose differently. So when she walked past the downtown bus station on her way home from a weekend hospital shift, and saw a girl slumped against the wall, hair matted, face gaunt, clothes filthy, something made her stop. The girl's head was down, but Emma recognized the bone structure, the shape of her hands. It was Ashley. Emma's first instinct was to keep walking. Ashley had mocked her, humiliated her, made her feel worthless in front of dozens of people. She owed her nothing. But then Ashley looked up, and their eyes met. And Emma saw it, that same fear, but deeper now, darker, desperate. Ashley's lips moved, cracked and trembling. Please. That one word shattered something in Emma's chest. She knelt down. Ashley? She nodded, unable to speak. Where are Madison and Brittany? Ashley pointed weakly down the street. Alley, behind the old theater. Emma stood, her heart pounding. She should call the police. She should call campus security. She should do anything except what she was about to do. But she didn't. She helped Ashley to her feet and said, "Show me." The alley smelled like urine and rot. Madison and Brittany were huddled together behind a dumpster, their bodies curled against the cold. They looked worse than Ashley, if that was even possible. Madison's head was completely bald now, her scalp covered in sores. Brittany's face was so swollen from infection that Emma almost didn't recognize her. Emma's stomach turned. She'd seen a lot in her clinical rotations. Car accident victims, overdose patients, people ravaged by disease. But this was different. These were people she knew. People who'd once walked through campus like royalty. Now they looked like they were dying. Madison, Emma said softly, kneeling beside her. Brittany. It's Emma. Madison's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, there was no recognition. Then something flickered. Emma? Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm here. I'm going to help you. Why? Brittany croaked. We were terrible to you. Emma's throat tightened. Because I'm going to be a nurse. And nurses don't get to choose who deserves help. Emma called an ambulance. She rode with them to Mercy General Hospital, the same hospital where she worked as a nursing assistant. She stayed while they were admitted, while doctors examined them, while nurses started IVs and ran blood work. The diagnosis was grim. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, infections, drug toxicity. Brittany's kidneys were failing. Ashley's teeth would need extensive work, if they could even be saved. But they were alive. Barely. The attending physician, Dr. Melissa Park, pulled Emma aside. You know these girls? We went to nursing school together. Dr. Park nodded slowly. They're lucky you found them. Another few days and we'd be looking at organ failure. Maybe death. She paused. They're going to need more than medical treatment. They need rehab, psychological support, long-term care. I know, Emma said. Can they afford it? Emma looked through the window at the three girls lying in hospital beds, hooked up to machines, looking small and broken. No, she said. But I'll figure something out. Emma spent the next week making calls. She contacted social services. She reached out to nonprofit organizations that helped addiction recovery. She talked to the hospital's financial aid department. She even started a small fundraiser through the Riverside Nursing Students Group, though many were skeptical. Why are you helping them? One classmate asked. After what they did to you? Emma took a breath. Because holding on to anger won't heal anyone. Not them, not me. Jordan Hayes, the veteran who'd exposed them in the first place, saw the fundraiser and sent Emma a message. I destroyed them. You're saving them. I don't know if they deserve it, but I respect you for trying. Emma wrote back. Everyone deserves a chance to change. Even them. Jordan donated $200. Others followed. Within 2 weeks, they'd raised enough to get Madison, Brittany, and Ashley into a recovery program, a 6-month residential rehab facility called New Horizons, located outside the city in a quiet, wooded area. It wasn't luxury, but it was hope. The first month of rehab was hell. Withdrawal ravaged their bodies. Madison vomited for 3 days straight. Brittany's hands shook so violently, she couldn't hold a fork. Ashley hallucinated, screaming at shadows that weren't there. They wanted to leave, wanted to run, wanted just one more hit to make it stop. But the counselors didn't let them. And slowly, painfully, agonizingly slowly, their bodies began to heal. Group therapy was harder than the physical withdrawal. Sitting in a circle with other addicts, being forced to talk about why they used, what they were running from, who they hurt along the way. Madison broke down in week 3. I just wanted to matter, she sobbed, her bald head in her hands. I didn't know how to matter, without being beautiful. I thought if I wasn't pretty, I was nothing. The counselor, a woman named Teresa who'd been sober for 15 years, leaned forward. And now? She asked gently. Madison looked up, tears streaming down her face. Now I don't even recognize myself. Good, Teresa said, because the person you were, she was killing you. It's time to meet the person you're supposed to be. Brittany's breakthrough came during a family therapy session. Her father, who hadn't spoken to her in 6 months, drove 4 hours to attend. He sat across from her, his face weathered and tired, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Brittany whispered, I'm sorry, Dad. Her father's jaw trembled. I thought I lost you. You almost did. He reached across the table and took her hand. And I'm not giving up on you. Brittany cried harder than she ever had in her life. Ashley's moment came quietly. 3 months into rehab, her teeth had been partially restored through a dental program for low-income patients. Her hair was growing back. Short, natural, unprocessed. Her skin, though scarred, was clearing. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror one morning and smiled. It wasn't a perfect smile. It wasn't an Instagram smile, but it was real. And for the first time in years, she felt okay with that. When they completed the 6-month program, Emma was there for their graduation. She brought flowers, simple grocery store bouquets, nothing expensive. Madison, Brittany, and Ashley stood at the front of the room, certificates in hand, looking nothing like the girls who once ruled Riverside University. Their hair was short and natural, their clothes simple. No designer bags, no lace fronts, no false eyelashes or acrylic nails. Just three women who'd survived. Madison stepped up to the microphone for the graduate speech. Her voice shook at first, but then steadied. "We used to have a saying," she began. "No lace, no space. We thought beauty was everything. We thought if we looked perfect, we'd be perfect. We mocked people who didn't have what we had. We hurt people who didn't deserve it." She looked directly at Emma. "I'm standing here today because someone I hurt chose mercy over revenge. Emma didn't have to help us. We didn't deserve it. But she did it anyway. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the kind of person who does the same." The room applauded. Emma wiped tears from her eyes. 6 months later, Madison, Brittany, and Ashley re-enrolled at Riverside University. Not in the nursing program, they'd lost that chance, but in addiction counseling. They started a campus organization called Second Chances, dedicated to helping students struggling with substance abuse, body image issues, and the crushing pressure to be perfect. They shared their story, honestly, painfully, without filters or edits. And students listened, because everyone knew who they used to be, and everyone could see who they'd become. Emma graduated top of her class and became a nurse at Mercy General. Jordan finished her degree and joined the Army Nurse Corps. And Madison, Brittany, and Ashley, once the baddies of Riverside, became the women who reminded everyone your worth isn't in your lace front. It's not in your designer bag. It's not in how many people follow you, or envy you, or fear you. It's in your heart. And a healed heart is the most beautiful thing you can wear.